Okay, and then you can hear me. Alrighty. Hey, yeah, it's working. Okay. Can't believe we got 18 pages to go. That's actually kind of wild. It took us this long. Alright. Chapter 24. We're going to start in like a minute. When we reach the minute mark, we're going to start. It's actually wild that the FNAF movie is back in theaters. Imagine the box office. It's probably not going to be a lot. But hey, money's money when, right? Box office is box office. Okay, let's see when he reaches the minute. Got like 18 pages left. Alright, we're gonna start chapter 24. We're almost done with the story. Like, look at this. Like, we're almost done. It's pretty cool, we're almost done. Alrighty. Let's start off with chapter 24. The last time we were at the Springtrap moment. Well, he didn't become Springtrap yet, but you know. Chapter 24. As much as she hated what was happening to Vanessa and wanted to run at the rabbit and beat him with her fist, Abby knew she couldn't help that way. The only thing she could do was what she was doing. She had to keep going towards the wall, so she didn't let her pace slow, even as she watched Vanessa struggle with her dad. Abby finally reached the wall. She quickly looked over her shoulder just in time to see Vanessa press toward the rabbit. Vanessa wrapped her dad in a big, hard bear hug. Oh no, Abby has thought. She understood that Vanessa was trying to save Abby, but by hugging a man like that, Vanessa has driven the knife much farther into her body. Abby started to cry just as the yellow rabbit roared. She watched the rabbit beat at Vanessa's back, trying to get free. Vanessa, however, didn't let go. Abby had to make Vanessa's sacrifice worth it. Turning to the walls of the children drawings, Abby quickly found the drawings of the yellow rabbit with the five kids. She reached for it. Glancing back, Abby saw that Vanessa was looking directly at Abby. Vanessa's eyes looked weird, like they were having a hard time staying on. Even so, Vanessa held Abby's gaze, and the rabbit continued to fight to get free. Abby got her hands on the drawing of the rabbit and the five kids. She crumpled the paper in her grip, and she whipped her hand away from the walls. When the drawing let go of the wall, it tore. The sound of the long, crackling rip was much louder than the normal sound of paper tearing. As soon as the sound ended, Abby saw Vanessa's arms start to drop away from her dad. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. Her voice was so weak that Abby barely heard it. Get off me, the man in the rabbit suit shrieked. The rabbit flung Vanessa aside, and he turned to look towards Abby. He let out a booming sound that made Abby think of a really angry dog. The rage, Abby knew, was directly at her, and the rabbit was now coming toward her too. The slap and the thud, the sound of the rabbit's foot filled the room. He was charging towards Abby. Abby quickly turned and pressed her new drawing in the wall, in the space where the other drawings had been. But the other drawings were stuck by the wall to the tape, and the tape has come away with the drawings. Abby had no way to attach her drawings to the wall. Abby looked at the wall, hoping to find a free piece of tape, but all the tapes holding her drawings were old. She knew none of them would work. The rabbit's footsteps were really close. Abby didn't turn to look, but she knew the rabbit was almost here. I know, Abby thought. Abby kept holding the drawings in place with one palm, and with her other hand she dug into her overall pockets. She pulled out a colored pencil and swinging her arm in a wide arc through the air, Abby rammed the pencil point through the drawings, jamming the pencil into the wall. Abby hadn't been sure if it would work. The wall wasn't soft enough like a board. When she let go of the pencil, the drawings stayed in place, and every light of the dining room went out. Abby hardly had time to breathe, much less to move, but she had to see what was happening. Abby turned away from the wall, even though the dining room lights were dark. The fluorescent lights in the lobby were still on. They were weak, but they could hold a tough brightness very far. But what reached was the walls of the pictures and the rest of the room. It was enough for Abby to see that no one was moving. The yellow rabbit was just a couple feet from Abby, but he was stopped dead. So were Freddie and Bonnie, who was standing over Mike. Vanessa on the floor, lying very still. Abby wanted to run to Vanessa and Mike, but she stayed where she was. Freddie and Bonnie turned their heads. They looked toward the yellow rabbit, then they started moving towards the rabbit, their steps slow and unsteady. The yellow rabbit's awful eyes locked on Abby. "What have you done?" he growled. Abby was still scared, but she put her shoulders back and said, "They can see you now." Abby took a step to the side. Suddenly, one of the stage spots lights came on. It landed right on Abby's new drawing. Abby looked at her work, even as panicked as she's drawn, even as worried for her brother Vanessa, even as grossed out as she's been by the yellow rabbit. Abby has done possibly the best drawing she's ever done in her life, or it could have been felt that way. Maybe the colors weren't perfect, and maybe some of the things in the drawings were a little shaky looking, but the message of the drawing was clear. Abby has drawn the yellow rabbit holding a bloody knife, standing over the dead bodies of the five little kids. Abby glanced at the yellow rabbit. She couldn't see the man's face behind the costume's rabbit head, but she could tell that the man did not like the drawing. The yellow rabbit's grimace looked even meaner than it has before. The yellow rabbit took a step towards Abby. She shrank back towards the wall. A whisper of movement, a thud. Foxy stepped out of the shadows beyond the spotlight. He put himself between Abby and the yellow rabbit. Abby's heart began to pound hard at her chest, but then Foxy turned toward the rabbit. "Move," the rabbit said to Foxy. Foxy didn't budge. "I said move," the yellow rabbit shouted. A loud click answered the rabbits below. A second spotlight burst on. It caught the yellow rabbit in a circle of white light, so powerful that Abby couldn't look directly at it. Neither could the yellow rabbit. He threw up a hand to shield his eyes. The yellow rabbit turns away from the light, and when he did, Freddie, Bonnie, and Chico were there. Almost by magic, Abby thought. But not really. They've been moving in the darkness. When Abby and the rabbit had been distracted by the spotlights, the yellow rabbit were no longer looking at Abby. He was startled by the animatronics. The animatronics didn't seem to care about Abby either. Now she moved. Abby stepped side along the walls. No one looked at her. That gave her the courage. Now she can move. Keeping her steps as light as possible, Abby hurried over to Mike. She dropped to her knees next to him. "Mike," Abby whispered. "Mike, wake up." The little hairs of Mike's eyelashes rippled against his skin, but he didn't open his eyes. Abby leaned over and put a hand on his shoulder. He shook him really hard. "Mike," she hissed loudly in his ears. Mike opened his eyes and blinked several times. Then he seemed to zero on Abby's face. "Abby?" Abby nodded but tensed when she heard a scrape and thump. She turned away from Mike. It was okay. She and Mike were okay. The animatronics were closer to the yellow rabbit now. They completely surrounded him, parading a circle that was about 2 feet from him, and they were pressing even closer. "Look at you," the yellow rabbit said. His voice was filled with disgust. He sounded the same way the bully sounded. "Look at the nasty things you have become. Look how small you are." The animatronics stopped moving. Abby bit her lip. They weren't going to listen to the yellow rabbit, were they? The yellow rabbit took advantage of the animatronic's hesitations. "Wretched, rotten little beast," he said, his voice even cooler than before. "Look how pathetic you are." The rabbit looked at each of the animatronics in turn. "Look how worthless you are." The yellow rabbit locked in on Chico, who stood before him with her cupcake platter raised. Her cupcake was back in place on the platter, poised but still. The yellow rabbit took a step towards Chica. He pointed at Chica and then pointed towards Mike and Abby. "Now get over there," he commanded, "and rip them apart before I rip all of you apart." Abby held her breath. What would the animatronics do? Abby got her answer in an instant. The cupcake sprang off its platter and it flew directly at the yellow rabbit's chest. It sank its big white teeth into the horny fake fur that stretched over the rabbit's heart. The yellow rabbit screamed. He battered at the cupcake, but it hung on him. It started to twist around it, jumping away as it was on fire. "Hello, hello." Surprisingly, we're almost done with the story. He threw away the cupcake so angrily that his costume head came off. Abby watched as the yellow rabbit's head shot through the air. The head hit the wall of the drawings and then bounced to the floor. It rolled over and over twice, then it lay still. The rabbit's ears drooped downwards. The toothy mouth gave open. Abby returned her attention to the man in the rest of the rabbit suit. He had collapsed to the floor. Kneeling, he grabbed the cupcake in both hands. He ripped the cupcake away from his chest. When the cupcake was plucked loose, it didn't open its mouth. It hung on, so a big white section of the yellow rabbit fur went with it. The gap in the rabbit suit made it possible to see the inner workings of the costume. Abby made a face and hugged herself when she saw what was under the fake fur. She had seen something like it before. It made her insides get all knotted up. The yellow rabbit's costume had the same thing inside it, the little red head grows animatronic head, the one Chica had tried to put Abby into. The suit was lined up with row after row of sharp metal things. Hello, hello. The suit was lined with row after row of sharp metal things. Now that Abby could see them more clearly than she had when she was fighting Chica, she decided the metal things looked like a bunch of crab claws. The claws would close up tight, curled towards the side of the suit, but if the claws opened, as Abby stared at the metal thing, she heard a snap, like a lock shooting back. One of the crab claws opened, then another and another. Abby saw blood starting to run into the metal. Then the blood strained the edge of the surrounding rabbit fur. Abby looked at the face of the man in the suit. His teeth were grinning. His eyes were wide. Abby thought of Vanessa, who was still sprawled on the floor. Vanessa might even be dead. The horrible man in the suit deserved what was happening to him. Abby stopped feeling sorry. She even liked it when she heard another snap and knew the man was being hurt even worse. It felt like 100 million drills were attempting to burrow into Mike's head and into the rest of his body too. He couldn't see quite right, and his body felt as floppy and useless as a fish snatched out of water. Mike was starting to get his bearings, though. He knew where he was in Freddie's dining room. He knew Abby was with him, and she was, as far as he can tell, okay. He also knew that the man who tried to kill him was getting his corrupt consequences done. Mike recognized the snapping sound he was hearing. He knew what was happening to the man and what was happening inside his costume. Good. What are those things in the suits? Abby asked. They're like the ones in the girl's suit that Chica tried to put me in. Mike felt like a donkey was kicking him in the chest. The idea of Abby, their spring locks, Mike said. The man in the rabbit suit, it was him, Steve Raglan, the career counselor who had hired Mike and whose voice was echoing in Mike's skull for so long. Mike didn't know, but Raglan wasn't his real name. His real name was Afton, William Afton, and the fate that somehow brought them together once again. Afton looked over at Mike and Abby, even though the guy was clearly incapacitated. Mike reached for Abby, wanting to protect her. Mike didn't have to worry though. Afton was just putting on a show of confidence. Afton's face was misshapen by pain, and his body was being jolted savagely by what was happening inside the rabbit suit. Still, though, the chain reaction with the spring locks, Afton was able to scoot over the floor. He dragged himself forward until he reached for the costume head. More snaps. Afton put the yellow rabbit head back on, his motion unsteady and weakened. The yellow rabbit managed to right himself. He faced the animatronics, who stood shoulder to shoulder watching the rabbit. I'll kill you once, Afton said, his voice straightening but strong inside the rabbit head. I'll do it again. The yellow rabbit took a step toward the animatronics. Mike heard a series of sharp sounds like chattering of metal teeth. Clink, clack, clink. The remaining spring locks were disintegrating, and even Afton looked into the destruction. He couldn't withstand that. The yellow rabbit's body was hunching inwards. Afton howled like a tortured animal. His yowls winched toward the buildings like a flurry of bats running toward a chamber, a torture chamber at the least. As if channeling the rabbit's torment, the pizzeria began to age. The buildings felt like it was whipping back and forwards on its footing. At the same time, the spotlight began to switch on and off. The lasers began to light up. They went out and they started up again. A mudding patchwork of blocks, song snippets intertwined with the bursts of static coming from the intercom speakers. Sensation overloaded. Chaos ensues. The buildings were now rattling at its very core. The remains of Abby's floor were stuttering across the dining room floor. Overhead lights were swinging, and one bank of the lights came crashing down. The light's metal frame landed just a couple feet from Abby, where it was too close for comfort. Mike forced his body into gear. They had to move. Come on, Mike shouted. Rejecting his body's weakness, Mike gathered himself from the ground. He had to lean a little on Abby to get himself in motion, but once he took the step, he got some momentum going. He started forward and aiming towards the lobby in a limping run, keeping a tight grip on Abby's hands. But Abby restricted his attempts to urge her forward. Wait, she cried. We have to get Vanessa. Vanessa? She's here? Mike frowned and looked around. Why was Vanessa here? She'd been admitted to that. She saved me, Abby shouted. Now she was tugging on Mike. Come on. Mike let Abby lead him not toward the lobby, but farther into the middle of the dining room. As soon as they took a couple steps, Mike spotted Vanessa. His feet faltered and his breathing hitched. Vanessa was prone on the floor, not moving. A pool of blood that was far too large to makes Mike optimistic about her survival, extended on all directions around her. She might already be gone, Mike thought. Hindered not by just his injuries, but a choking grief, Mike was barely able to make it the rest out of the way to where Vanessa lay. But he got there, and when he did, he lowered himself to one knee, where he planted in the sticky red soil that surrounded Vanessa. As Mike put two fingers against Vanessa's neck, and to his relief, he felt a pulse. He saw movement on the other side of the room, even over the continued mismatch of the music and static. He heard the animatronic's footsteps. He muscled tense and he lifted his gaze. Mike has been sure that the animatronics were coming for him and Abby, but they weren't. They clearly could not have cared less about Mike and his sister. They were otherwise occupied. Mike watched as Foxy used his hook to drag the yellow rabbit along behind him. The other green animatronics followed Foxy and the rabbit into the back hallway. Mike, Abby said. She shook his arm. I don't think she's doing good. Mike whipped his gaze back to Vanessa. Abby was right. Vanessa was alive, but barely. Come on, he said. Help me. Neither Mike nor Abby should have been strong enough to lift an unconscious woman, but they did it anyways. They managed to brace herself in between them as they both got back to their feet. Then each of them hooked one of Vanessa's limp arms around her neck. Holding tight to Vanessa's arms, they managed to start dragging her across the dining room. Mike glanced towards the back hallway as they went, but he saw nothing but a pipeline of black. The animatronics and the yellow rabbit were no longer within view. The chords and snatches of lyrics that still spilled from the speakers were louder now. The lights were playing Now You See Me, Now You Don't, even faster than before. The floor began to move under Mike and Abby's feet. It felt like the buildings were beginning to sway. Mike heard a tinny sing above his head, and he looked up. He saw the brackets holding two sets of spotlights to the spinning vent lids. The spotlights came crashing down. They landed just a foot to Mike's right. Without a word, Mike and Abby picked up the pace. They were both grunting with effort, both panting. Mike's face was hot and he had to keep blinking with sweat from his eyes. On the hills of the falling spotlights, the whole bank of flower lights began exploding. The glass had poured over the room. Look down, Abby, Mike yelled. He followed his own advice, which kept glass from getting in his eyes. But he felt barb-sized shards poking at his skull as the glass showered into his head. Just a few more steps, Mike told himself. He strained to keep hold of Vanessa's arm. Her skin was slick with blood. So were his hands. Mike glanced at Abby, worried that she wouldn't have the strength to keep going, but Abby was a trooper. Her lips were sad. She was frowning fiercely. One step, two steps, three steps. They made it to the lobby as a hellish moan crawled from what felt like the most hidden recess of the building. The sound reached for them like it was the killer's hands. Mike Shawty looked back over his shoulder. He nearly let go of Vanessa, which she saw a wharf-like bulkhead of smoke closing in on the lobby. The smoke was coming fast, too fast. It's going to overtake us, Mike thought. It would. Check clock, Mike thought, pulled his gaze from the smoke monster and saw that Abby has released the front door handle. She was leaning into the door, pushing it outward. Mike tried to move forward and he tripped. His head hit the door and he saw nothing. Darkness. Chapter 25. And we're almost done. We just need to, let's see, we created 919 and we only need like 321. We're almost done, guys. Chapter 25 is the final chapter. Mike has never heard birds sing so loudly. Shielding his eyes against the sun that was playing hide and seek in the cloud-filled sky, Mike looked up at the trees that encircled the clean white lines of the Child Development Center. The massive oak and pines appeared as if they were standing guard over the building and its precious occupants. The birds Mike could hear were hopping from branch to branch in the trees. Mike realized he never really paid a lot of attention to the birds in real life. He heard the ones in the dreams every night, but he has never listened to their songs during the day. Not really. Well, he was going to start now. I'm going to start to do a lot of things, he decided, but right now he needs to pick up his sister. Hello, hello. It took Mike a few minutes to get into the building and make it down the long hall to the activity center. He was still limping. Mostly the limp was caused by the gouge in his calf, but he had a couple hairline cracks in his bones too. And not big enough for the cast, his doctors told him they healed on their own. The rest of Mike's injuries were healing too. He needed a lot of stitches, and for a couple weeks, he looked like he had them in the ankle with splashes of black and blue and purple. But 3 weeks out, the bruises had mostly faded, his stitches were gone, and he was good on his own. The sound of laughter hurried Mike along. He looked ahead and saw Dr. Lydian was standing in front of the activity center window. They exchanged a wave, and Mike was at her side a few seconds later. Mike grinned at Dr. Lillian and looked through the windows inside the colorful play space. A group of 6 kids were in the mess around of a game and tag, and to Mike's total joy, Abby was one of the kids. His sister, wearing her favorite red overalls, bobbing and weaving to avoid getting caught. She has some mad moves, running from the animatronic and serial killer rabbit has honed her escape skills, and thankfully, it didn't seem to gather their spirit at all, just the opposite. Right now, she just did an impressive drop and roll that got her out of the range of the little boy with a flat top buzz cut. Abby grinned bigger and wider than he has ever seen. Abby shot to her feet and leaped away from the little redhead girl. She spotted her brother and gave him a brief wave. Then she was off again, sprinting to the far side of the room. It's really extraordinary, Dr. Lillian said. The turn she's taken these past few weeks. She seems almost happy. I turned to look at Dr. Lillian. The doctor turns in a lock of white hair behind her ears. She nodded. Then she glanced down at the leg he favored. One of these days, she said, you have to tell me what happened. She pointed at the leg and, how did you get that limp? Mike smiled, but he didn't agree to spill the beans. Mike and the doctor watched Abby in silence for a few seconds. Then Dr. Lydian asked casually, and still no word from Jane? Mike shook his head, and he's been ready for this question, and he answered just casually as Dr. Lydian has asked it. You know, he said, I think my aunt has finally decided to move on. I mean, she kind of did, Mike thought. Mike flipped on his car turn signal. The creaky click-clack let on the sounds of the squeaking brakes as he maneuvered the old Jeopardy around the corner. A belch of exhaustion wafted in through Mike's open window. He gave the dashboard in front of his steering wheel a pat. The car started to amuse him more than annoy him. Mike looked over at Abby, who had her feet pressed against the glove box. Her sketch pad was propped on her knees. She was drawing something Mike couldn't see. It's really not that hard, Mike said. Abby said, looking. I asked you a simple question, Mike pushed to the which there's a very simple answer. Pizza or spaghetti? Abby held up her drawing pad. Mike flipped a look at it. She drawn a platter of pizza and spaghetti. I told you. I want both, she said. Hmm, Mike said. I guess we're getting an impasse. Abby gave Mike a pretend glare. Then she half grinned and applied with a colored pencil to her drawings. She made a sweeping motion with the pencil and she grazed over the pad down the sink. Mike glanced over the pad. Abby had circled the spaghetti. Mike returned his attention to the road. Done, he said. Abby smiled. She flipped the page on her drawing pad. Mind if we make the first stop first? Mike asked. Nope, Abby said, concentrating on the drawing. Mike lowered himself into a high-backed tan vinyl chair that was pulled up next to a safety rail hospital bed. He breathed slowly because he hated the soup of odors in the ICU breach and medicines, and rubber urine of hospital food. Why did the hospital food smell like overcooked green beans? The ICU were all occupied, and so was the U-shaped cluster of glass fountain enclosure. As it was filled with sounds, Mike could hear the pumping of the vents, the bill of the monitors, and the equipment being moved, the snuff of shoes of nursing homes, and a continued voice softens of loud noises. Vanessa's critical care was outside of the walls area, so the sun was still puffy white clouds, putting the soft hand of the warmth against Vanessa. If only Vanessa can feel it, or maybe she could. One of the nurses had told Mike that even when patients were in a coma, they were able to be aware of what was going on around them. You can talk to her, the ponytail nurse says to Mike. He leaned forward and looked at Vanessa's pale eyelids, another than top of her face. This was all that he could see of Vanessa's face. The rest was obscured by the ventilator that was keeping her alive. Her body recovered from its massive blood loss. Surgeons had repaired her wounds, but her own system had to do the rest. So the big news is, Mike said, I finally got a new job. Not exciting as the last one, but I'm thinking there's probably a good thing. Mike chuckled briefly, but the sound of his amusement didn't fit with the other noises of the ICU. Mike went silent. He was lying about the job. In truth, he was very excited about his appreciation level position with a construction firm that was building a big complex at the other town. The foreman, who said he's passed on his own, didn't have a problem with a talking chance with Mike. He even told Mike that he could use company tools and scrap wood to work on his own projects off hours. Mike thought he might make himself some bedroom furniture. Maybe Mike would tell Vanessa about his new job another day. And now he said, look, I know we have a lot to talk about. There are some big things I still need to you to explain, but I made peace with a lot of what happened. I know certain decisions you made well. You weren't in control of them, and I know when it mattered the most, you were there for me and Abby. Mike thought about Abby's description of what had happened to Vanessa, what he'd been out of it. He immediately shut his mind down. He didn't need to linger on that ugliness. I don't think either one of us would be here today if it wasn't for you. Mike told Vanessa. Mike reached out and took the limp soft hand that laid on top of a thin white hospital blanket. At that simple touch, a current of emotions rushed through him. So many feelings, which was the most domain sadness, anger, regret, caring, maybe something even more than that. Mike can dissect his own behavior. He wasn't used to the nuisance like this. He'd been running on such limited settings. Grief, regret, so many years these nuisance stations were going to take some getting used to. Mike squeezes Vanessa's hands. Healed up, heal up, Vanessa. His voice crackled on her name. He cleared his throat. Get strong, and then we'll talk. Mike got up and left the room without glancing back. He tuckled all his emotions away for a later time as he navigated the wall hospital corridors to get back to the cheerier yellow wall lobby. There he found Abby, right where he left her, in the plush blue chair, within eye shots of the young brunette receptionist, who was agreed to keep one eye on Mike's sister while he was gone. Abby was trying when Mike walked up to her. Mike gave the receptionist a wave and thanked her as he looked down at Abby. Abby tucked away the drawing pad stood still. Did you tell her I said hi? She asked. Yeah, Abby. Mike gave Abby a quick hug. Let's go home. Mike looked out the living room window as he took his seat next to Abby at the kitchen table. The sun, possibly tired from its day of games with the clouds, seemed to be going down faster than usual. It had to be put down the dust PJs, and now it looked like an orange ball. The bottom of the ball has already dipped behind the hills. Mike looked down at his plate. Another ball and a meatball was sliding off the top of a mountain spaghetti. It rode to the edge of the plate and stopped. Mike looked at Abby. She was toying with her fork, turning the handle around and turning her folded napkin. Her gaze was focusing on the disappearing sun. Oh wow, the power went out. Hey guys, the power went out. Hold on guys. Freddy Fazbear turned the power out. That's crazy. Oh wow, the power actually went out. Oh wow, we can reread in the dark. Everything okay? Mike asked. I was just thinking about my friend. You mean Freddie and Chica and the others? She nodded. They're all alone, and no one takes care of them anymore. Abby pulls her gaze from the setting in the sun and looks at Mike. Can we visit them sometime? No way in hell, Mike thought. His thought must have been clear on his face because Abby looked down at her feet and she sighed. Mike thought about the promise he made to her at Freddy's. He was going to do better. He meant it. So if he meant that much to Abby, Mike touched Abby's arm. When she looked up, he made sure her expression was neutral. You never know what can happen, he said. Abby smiled. She stopped holding her fork. Mike noticed that the glass next to her napkin was empty. I forgot the milk, he said, jumping up. Mike stepped to the fridge. He opened the door and grabbed a carton of milk. As he closed the door, his gaze landed on Abby's drawing, secured next to the door handle by a smiling face magnet. The drawing was of Abby, Mike, and Vanessa and the four animatronics. They were inside the table fort at Freddys. Finley let his lip tip upwards and outwards. The smallest of smiles, Mike turned away from the drawing and returned to the table and poured Abby's milk. The milk sloshed into the glass, making a click-cluck sound that acted as a catalyst, snatching from the present and plucking him back in his childhood. In his mind, he was watching the milk fill a different glass, his own glass. Mike looked up from the glass and he saw his mom set down the milk carton and sit across with him. She smiled at him and linked both arms to join hands with Garrett and Mike's dad. At the same time, Garrett and Mike's dad took Mike's hand. During the family bowed their head. Mike blinked and he was back in the present. Mike reached for Abby's hand and she took it. Sharing a brief smile, they bowed their hands and closed their eyes. Abby spoke, "Thanks for the food and everything else. Amen." Short and sweet, Mike thought. He squeezed Abby's hand, but he didn't let go of it. Painfully, Mike wondered briefly what the tick-tock of the setting sun, almost gone now, was seen as he peeked in through the window. He imagined the scene from the sun's perspective. Brother and sister holding hands, head bowed, holding the moment because it was a perfect one. For this moment, Mike and Abby were happy. The end. And that is the FNAF movie novel. We finally finished the entire FNAF movie novel. So yeah, that is the FNAF movie novel. We're gonna read the epilogue. Learn the epilogue. The blond boy moved through Freddy's like he was given a toy to nobody, caught in the shadows upon shadows. The room hunkered within the protected walls of the old restaurant. The empty lobby posters still bared of glass, the long hallway with more glass posters. The security office, its monitors lift up and no one was watching them. The kitchen all shiny and still, the parking service room, a mess of robot parts, and empty metal chairs, and of course the dining room, where the animatronics stood wriggly on their barely lit stages. Everything was totally quiet. The blond boy went on down to the back of the hallways. All the doors along the halls were closed, except for one at the very end. The blond boy went through the doors into a small, hardly more than closeted-sized room. He looked over the lights of the hallway landed on the room, dusty checkerboard floored, and beyond that, the yellow rabbit slumped in the corner of the walls. He was in the crisp cement block wall, not a rabbit, a man in a horrible costume, a twitching man stuck in a spear of blood. It was a crushed, dried blood that was stuck to the floor, maybe forever. The boy watched the man from the doorway, taking the satisfaction in the man's suffering. The boy wanted that suffering to go on as long as it did, maybe longer. The boy backed out of the room. He closed the door, sealing the yellow rabbit into a black prison. And we did it. We finished the FNAF movie novel. And yeah, we officially did it. And here's the end of the novel. We get the fact sheet right here. Yeah. We officially finished the FNAF movie novel. Thank you for visiting us in this journey of reading the FNAF movie novel. It's been fun. I'll be giving out my review of the FNAF movie when I head out to the AMC theater. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.